So for our listeners or viewers who may not be so familiar with the problems of American neighborhoods, they may see things on the news related to gun violence and all of that. Can you just list 4 or 5 problems that would help people imagine how it's like, that kind of an experience?
Yes, thank you. Well, the way I would look at it is we tend to focus on problems, and I'm focused on social context. And so think about problems. You have, all the problems. You have drug problems. Over 100,000 Americans die every year from drug overdose. That is double the number of people that died in Vietnam. And Vietnam was over many years. Remember the protests from Vietnam, 60s and 70s? I don't see many protests over the drug deaths. It's kind of amazing how many people die and how little attention it receives in the national conversation. But so you have the problems of deaths of the spear. You have the problems of suicides. You may not see it. It's happening. You have the problems of I would say teenagers and young people being much more depressed and unhappy especially since around 2011, 2012. So these are things that you're seeing. But my argument is, and of course you have all the material problems. You have hunger, you have residential instability, you have the problem of family stability, which doesn't get much of a conversation in the United States. But roughly speaking, the United States is much different than Europe in terms of family stability. We both have become much more liberal on marriage and divorce, and not getting married or getting divorced, and so on and so forth. But the statistics are quite stark in terms of children's experience growing up in stable families, stable houses, stable neighborhoods. You very rarely in Europe see the extent that we have millions and millions and millions of children that are not experiencing the type of upbringing and social context at home, on their street, in their neighborhood that will allow them to thrive. And that's a major driver of inequality in the United States. So these are all things that I would say you're looking at that you would not necessarily see elsewhere. But I think the key point I want to make is, for me, the outcomes, whether it's deaths of despair, suicides, children that aren't happy, those are downstream. And what I've tried to focus on is that if you looked around the United States, the title of my book includes the zip code. You have zip codes or neighborhoods that are doing very well. My neighborhood, I chose this neighborhood on purpose. You have the academic I mentioned with the neighborhood that she discovered by accident in Connecticut. You have parts of the United States in which there are high degrees of social cohesion, social support. You have Chevy Chase, which is very wealthy, but also a socially thriving neighborhood near Washington. And you have some poor areas that I can tell you they're immigrant communities, or they're very closely tied in terms of people, and they're socially thriving. They don't necessarily have all these problems. But if we want to tackle these issues that I've raised, I believe we need to go to the neighborhoods. We need to go to the institutions that are in those neighborhoods, and we need to find ways to strengthen those dynamics. And we can get into solutions or things you can do, but I don't believe tackling suicides by tackling suicides, tackling loneliness by tackling loneliness, that is not the answer to these problems, in my opinion. Yes, you need to do things, but we'd be much better off with dealing with the cross-cutting social context that is increasing those problems across the board.